All right, let's get those brains fired up.
Yes.
Today we're diving deep into ancient Greek logic, specifically Aristotle's Organon.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, you want to understand how this work laid the foundation for formal logic as we know it,
Right.
especially those concepts of syllogisms and deductive reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
And believe me, it's way more interesting than it sounds.
It really is. These ancient ideas are still so relevant today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's start with that term organon.
Okay.
It means instrument or tool in Greek, which shows us that Aristotle saw logic as a practical method,
Okay.
a way to sharpen your thinking
Right.
and to build strong arguments.
So it's not just some dusty old philosophy.
No, not at all.
More like a toolbox.
Exactly.
Cool. Now, the Organon isn't just one book, is
It's
it?
actually a collection of 6 different works called treatises.
6. Wow, that's
Yeah.
a lot.
That's
Cover.
a lot.
So to really grasp this this logical toolbox, could we quickly go through each one?
Of course.
We can. What's the focus of each treatise?
Okay, so first up we have categories.
Okay.
It examines different ways we can classify things like substance, quantity, quality, relation.
So it's kind of like creating a system for organizing knowledge.
Precisely. It's about defining terms, creating a mental filing cabinet.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
You have to know what you're talking about
Right.
before you can even start building arguments.
Yeah. And that leads us nicely to the next one, on interpretation.
Okay.
This is where Aristotle focuses on propositions, those statements that can be true or false, and it analyzes how we use language to make meaningful assertions.
I see. So it's getting at how we structure our ideas.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've defined our terms, we've formed statements.
Right.
What's next?
Now things get really interesting with prior analytics.
Ooh, good.
This is where Aristotle introduces syllogisms,
Yes, finally.
the heart of his deductive reasoning system.
Yeah, syllogisms, I've heard of them,
Okay.
but never fully understood how they work.
Well, a syllogism uses 2 premises, which are statements assumed to be true,
Okay.
to reach a conclusion that must also be true if those premises are valid.
Okay.
The classic example is, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal.
I see. It seems so simple, but there's something powerful about that structure.
It's the clarity of the logical relationships.
Right.
You have the major premise, all men are mortal, the general statement,
Yes.
and the minor premise, Socrates is a man, a specific case.
Mm-hmm.
And if both are true, the conclusion just follows logically.
Wow. He created a system for analyzing the validity of any argument.
Exactly. Regardless of the topic.
It's amazing. So from there, where do we go in this journey?
Well, next we have posterior analytics.
Okay.
This one delves into scientific knowledge and demonstration.
Oh, wow. So from arguments to science.
Yeah.
That's a big leap.
It is here where Aristotle explores how we arrive at knowledge that is not only valid, but also true and certain.
So he's basically laying the groundwork for scientific methodology.
That's right. He's figuring out how we build reliable knowledge about the world.
So fascinating.
It is. And then we move on to topics.
Okay.
This one focuses on dialectic or reasoned debate.
Oh, so like a guide to winning arguments?
Not just about winning.
Oh,
It's more about using reason to understand even when there's disagreement.
Even when there's disagreement.
Yes.
That's important,
Really important.
especially these days.
Yes, definitely.
So we've got tools for building arguments,
Yes.
testing knowledge,
Yes.
engaging in good debates.
Uh-huh.
What's the final piece of this puzzle?
The last one is sophistical refutations.
Okay.
This treatise is all about identifying and dismantling fallacies.
Fallacies.
Yeah, those sneaky flaws in reasoning that can trip us up
Oh, right.
when we're making arguments or just evaluating them.
Oh, yeah. I think I see fallacies everywhere now that you mention it.
I know, right?
It seems like people use them all the time without realizing it.
They do.
Can we go over some examples later?
Absolutely. Understanding fallacies is crucial for critical thinking.
Right, because they can be so persuasive, but then fall apart when you look closer.
Exactly.
This is already so much more than I expected.
good.
I'm starting to see why the Organon has had such a huge impact on Western thought.
It really has.
But with 6 treatises and so much to cover,
Right.
what are the key takeaways we should focus on as we go deeper?
I think it's crucial to understand how these treatises work together as a system.
Okay.
Each one builds on the previous one
Yes.
to create this comprehensive framework for logical reasoning.
Got it.
And while we'll certainly dig into specific concepts like syllogisms and fallacies,
Yes.
I think it's equally important to grasp how Aristotle's work laid the foundation for scientific inquiry and shaped the way we approach knowledge and argumentation even today.
Okay, I'm ready for more. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of syllogisms and deductive reasoning and all that good stuff.
Let's do it.
Let's see what we can uncover from Aristotle's amazing logical toolbox.
I think we'll find some fascinating stuff.
I think so, too.
You know, it's fascinating how Aristotle didn't just create this system of logic.
Yeah.
He also explored the broader implications of reasoning,
Okay.
including its limitations.
Oh, so he realized logic can't solve every problem.
Exactly. He understood that while logic is a powerful tool,
Right.
it's not a magic bullet.
Okay.
For example, he recognized that the effectiveness of logical arguments depends heavily on the truth of the premises.
That makes sense. If you start with faulty assumptions, your conclusions will be flawed, too.
It's like building a house on a shaky foundation.
Right. Even with perfect construction, the whole thing could collapse.
Exactly.
So how do you ensure your premises are actually true?
Well, that's a tricky question.
Yeah.
Aristotle argued that some knowledge is self-evident, like basic math principles or the principle of non-contradiction.
Right. Something can't be both true and false at the same time.
Right.
The same way.
Exactly.
But for other knowledge, we rely on observation, experience, and what he called inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning. How is that different from deductive reasoning?
Well, deductive reasoning starts with general principles and applies them to specific cases.
Okay, like that Socrates example.
Precisely.
Socrates is mortal.
Right.
Okay.
Inductive reasoning works in the opposite direction, starting with specific observations
Okay.
and then drawing general conclusions from them.
So if I see a lot of white swans,
Yes.
I might conclude that all swans are white.
Exactly.
Even though I haven't seen every swan in the world.
That's right, and that's where the limitations come in.
Okay.
Inductive reasoning doesn't guarantee the truth of its conclusions.
Right. You can see 1,000 white swans and then one black swan shows up and your whole theory is blown.
That's a great point. It reminds me of the saying, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Ooh, I like that.
Right?
Just because you haven't seen something doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Precisely. Aristotle recognized this uncertainty in inductive reasoning. That's why he emphasized careful observation, rigorous testing, and a willingness to change our beliefs when we get new evidence.
So logic isn't about finding absolute truth.
Not necessarily.
It's more about constantly updating our understanding of the world.
That's a great way to put it. It's a process of ongoing inquiry and revision.
I see. So how does this affect how we approach things like scientific discovery?
Well, it highlights the importance of critical thinking,
Okay.
skepticism, and a willingness to challenge assumptions.
So we always have to be evaluating the information we're using.
Absolutely. And this is especially important today with the constant bombardment of information.
It's true. It's easy to be swayed by arguments that sound logical, even if they're based on shaky premises.
It's like being able to spot a counterfeit bill.
Ooh, yeah.
It might look real at first glance, but closer inspection reveals the flaws.
So how do we develop that critical eye? How do we get better at evaluating information?
One key is to pay attention to the source.
Okay.
Is it credible?
Yeah.
Is it unbiased?
So it's not just what they're saying, but who's saying it.
Exactly. We need to be aware of biases and motivations.
Especially when someone's trying to persuade us.
Aristotle was very aware of how rhetoric could be used to manipulate.
It's like everyone has a perspective that shapes how they see the world.
Precisely.
And that could affect the information they present.
Exactly. Another key is to look for supporting evidence.
Right. Don't just take their word for it.
And finally, be willing to consider alternative perspectives.
Even if an argument seems logical at first.
Yes, even then.
You should explore other viewpoints.
Yes, you might find flaws or gaps you hadn't considered.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught in an argument that supports what we already believe.
True critical thinking requires being open to being wrong.
Wow. So Aristotle was aware of how logic could be misused.
Yes, very much so.
And how our reasoning could go astray.
He dedicated a whole treatise to it.
Really?
Yes, it's called Sophistical Refutations. It dissects common fallacies, those deceptive arguments that seem convincing but actually aren't.
Ooh, fallacies.
Yeah.
This is getting good.
It's like a guidebook for identifying those tricky arguments.
Okay, I'm ready to put on my fallacy detective hat.
Let's do it. Let's start with one that's still very common today.
Okay.
The ad hominem fallacy.
Ad hominem. I've heard that term, but can you remind me what it is?
It's basically attacking the person making the argument instead of the argument itself.
Oh, right. Like if someone criticizes a policy by attacking the politician who proposed it.
Exactly.
Instead of addressing the policy itself.
That's a classic ad hominem attack.
Wow. It's amazing how the ancient fallacies are still so relevant today.
They are. And Aristotle's work gives us tools to counter them.
By understanding them, we can recognize them and avoid using them
Yep,
ourselves.
exactly. So we have ad hominem.
Yep.
What other fallacies did Aristotle identify? Let's look at the straw man fallacy.
Okay, the straw man.
This one involves misrepresenting your opponent's argument, making it easier to attack.
Oh, so you create this fake version of their argument just to knock it down?
Oh, it's like setting up a fake opponent to make yourself look good.
That's not fair at all.
It's a way to avoid engaging with the real issue.
Right.
Aristotle emphasized fairness and accuracy when addressing opposing arguments.
So it's not about winning, but about honest intellectual debate.
Precisely. And another one worth mentioning is the appeal to popularity fallacy.
Appeal to popularity.
This is the idea that something must be true just because a lot of people believe it.
Oh, the bandwagon effect.
Yeah.
Just because it's popular doesn't make it true.
Exactly. But it can be hard to resist the pull of popular opinion.
It can, but Aristotle emphasized independent thinking.
Okay? And critical analysis regardless of trends or opinions.
That's so important to remember. Truth isn't determined by how many people agree with something.
Right. It's about evidence and reason.
Okay, so we've got ad hominem, straw man, and appeal to popularity.
Yes.
Any others that are particularly relevant today?
Well, there's the false dilemma fallacy.
Okay, what's that one?
This is when someone presents a situation as having only two options, when in reality there might be other possibilities.
Oh, right, like those "you're either with us or against us" argument.
Exactly. It oversimplifies things and forces a choice between extremes.
Right.
But Aristotle recognized that reality is rarely black and white.
Most issues have multiple perspectives.
Exactly.
This is making me realize how important it is to be aware of these fallacies.
Yes.
Not just in debates, but in everyday life.
It's a whole new way of looking at the world.
It's making me question everything I hear.
That's a good thing. Aristotle's work gives us a framework for critical thinking
Okay.
that we can apply to everything.
So we can be more discerning about the information we encounter and have better conversations.
Exactly.
But did Aristotle have any advice on how to actually put these principles into practice?
He did. He wrote about rhetoric, which is the art of persuasion.
Rhetoric. I always thought that was about using fancy language to trick people.
That's a common misconception.
Oh.
Aristotle believed that rhetoric, when used ethically, could be a powerful tool for communication.
So how did he connect logic and rhetoric?
He saw logic as the foundation for sound reasoning,
Go ahead.
while rhetoric provided the tools to communicate that reasoning effectively.
So they work together.
Exactly. A persuasive argument needs both.
Okay.
A strong logical structure
Mhm.
and an engaging presentation.
It's like logic gives you the blueprint,
Yes.
and rhetoric helps you decorate and make it livable.
That's a great analogy. And his insights into rhetoric are still relevant today.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to communication. I want to learn more about how Aristotle viewed rhetoric.
Of course. Well, he identified three key elements of persuasion: logos, ethos, and pathos.
Okay, logos, ethos, and pathos, tell me more. Okay, so
No.
logos, ethos, pathos. Those three elements of persuasion, break those down for me.
All right, logos refers to the logical appeal of your argument, using reason and evidence and clear connections between your ideas.
Okay, so kind of like building a case like a lawyer presenting the facts.
Exactly. Logos is all about the logical structure.
Makes sense, given everything we've talked about with syllogisms and deductive reasoning.
Right.
But persuasion's obviously more than just logic, right? What about ethos and pathos?
Pure logic isn't always enough. Ethos is about the credibility of the speaker.
Okay.
It's how trustworthy you seem to your audience.
Okay, so it's not just what you say, but who you are.
Exactly. Do they believe you know what you're talking about? Do you seem like someone they should listen to?
Right, like if you're getting advice, you're more likely to trust someone who's experienced and who seems to genuinely care.
Exactly. Expertise and sincerity are both key.
Okay, so we've got the logic of the argument itself.
Yep.
Logos.
Yep.
And the credibility of the speaker. Ethos.
Right.
What about pathos? Where does emotion fit into all of this?
Pathos is all about the emotional appeal connecting with your audience on a deeper level.
Oh.
By tapping into their feelings and values.
So acknowledging that we're not just rational, but also emotional.
Exactly. A truly persuasive argument needs to speak to both our heads and our hearts.
You like those powerful speeches or stories that really move you.
Exactly. They combine strong logic with vivid imagery, relatable examples, even humor.
It's like a recipe for communication.
Uh-huh.
A dash of logic, a pinch of credibility, and a sprinkle of emotion.
That's a great way to put it. Aristotle believed a skilled communicator needs to master all three.
This is really eye-opening. Even a simple conversation is this complex interplay of Logic, credibility, and emotion.
It is, and it's not just public speaking.
Right.
These principles apply to writing, to online discussions, to everything, really.
So understanding logos, ethos, and pathos can make us better communicators overall. It's
Absolutely.
like having a secret decoder ring for understanding how people communicate.
Uh-huh. I like that.
But did Aristotle offer any specific tips or techniques for putting these principles into practice?
He did. He talked about the use of enthememes.
Encomiums, what are those?
It's like a compressed syllogism where one of the premises is implied but not directly stated.
So it's like a shortcut in reasoning where you rely on the audience to fill in the gaps.
Exactly. It gets the audience involved in completing the argument,
Interesting.
which can make them more likely to accept the conclusion.
Can you give me an example of an enthemy?
Sure, someone might say, he's a dedicated teacher, so he deserves our respect.
Okay.
The implied premise is that dedicated teachers are worthy of respect.
Right. It's not stated outright, but everyone understands it.
Exactly. It creates a stronger emotional connection.
Wow, it's like a subtle nudge towards a certain conclusion.
Exactly. Aristotle saw enthymemes as a powerful tool for building consensus.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see these subtle, persuasive techniques everywhere now.
And that awareness is key. It makes us more critical thinkers, more discerning about the information we consume, and more effective communicators ourselves.
This deep dive into Aristotle's Organon has been amazing. It's incredible how ideas from thousands of years ago are still so relevant today.
It's a testament to the power of human reason and our desire to understand the world around us.
And like any deep dive, this is just the beginning.
Exactly. There's always more to explore, more to question, and more to discover.
I'm definitely inspired to keep learning and applying these principles in my own life. Thanks for being such a great guide.
It was my pleasure. Remember, the journey of knowledge is never over. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep into the world of ideas.
To our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Aristotle's Organon. We encourage you to check out the source material and see what other insights you can uncover. Until next time, keep those brain muscles flexing and never stop exploring the world of knowledge.